All right, friends, Considering Charlotte is a series that we've begun in order to attempt to better understand what's coming up in the General Conference of the United Methodist Church next month. It's going to be meeting in Charlotte, hence the name of the series, and we have consulted a lot of different topics, a lot of different resources. Last week, we concluded our 3 episodes on regionalization with a guest speaker, Lloyd Niarota, who is one of the authors of the Christmas Covenant. Today, we're really happy to be joined by Forbes Matonga. He's a Zimbabwean clergyman. He's actually right now in Georgia at Emory, and so just a stone's throw from Odell. We just now discovered this. But the reason we're having him on today is because the topic we wanted to discuss was the episcopacy, or bishops within the United Methodist Church. It's not one of the main things that's before the body of General Conference next month, but maybe it should be. And the reason why is what we're going to start with Forbes on. He's got limited time for us, so we're going to take what time he has. The quote here, he recently published an op-ed in the News, United Methodist News, where here's the quote: "Regionalization as proposed does not go far enough to assure Africans that their position against the affirmation of same-sex relationships will not be compromised under the so-called Big Tent theological umbrella." Here's the real big part. "Indeed, as long as the Council of Bishops itself is not regionalized, then this whole talk of regionalization is a smokescreen." So that's a big statement to say, and we've already heard Lonnie Brooks make similar points on air before. I'm just barely smart enough to understand this. For our audience today, we're going to spend time with Forbes, and then we're going to spend a little bit more time digesting the implications of how the episcopacy is designed in the United Methodist Church. So even if your eyes glaze over with this sort of stuff, it's worth understanding and paying attention, because there's no point, if Reverend Matonga is right, there's no point pushing through all these constitutional amendments and stuff, which, by the way, he also says there's no way it's going to be adopted across the denomination. But even so, there's no point doing all that if you don't solve the key issue of episcopacy. It's all just a lot of labor and effort that's not even going to work out. So if that's the case, that needs to be seen on the front end rather than the back end. So with that in mind, Forbes, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you so much, brother, for joining us today. How are you doing? I'm doing okay. Thank you for having me. Yes, of course. And Simon's just now joining us, and we're glad to have Simon as well. Simon, Forbes was about to introduce to us how he sees the picture of the episcopacy in the United Methodist Church, what's at stake here with regionalization, and other just general genius insights that we have him on here for. So, Forbes, it's your show. Take it away, whatever direction you want to go.
Thank you so very much. Indeed, you saw my article. I'm one of those people with serious concerns about the regionalization plan as is proposed at the present moment to the United Methodist Church. Just a recap of some of our concerns. Number one, Africa has been divided by colonialism. And if you look at the proposals that are coming, the United Methodist is joining in further dividing the African continent. For example, the Central Conferences, as they stand together, will remain as regions, which may mean that the Congo becomes a region on its own. Then you have another one that is very interesting, that one African country, Algeria, I guess, is actually in the region of Europe. And then so the divisions themselves will not make the African voice stronger. On the contrary, you find that America is remaining a single unit, which means as a region, it becomes a more powerful region versus a very fragmented African region. So that is one point that we need to see. So the regionalization is not strengthening the African church, it is further weakening the African church when it comes to voicing issues. Whereas the current scenario is that African was actually regaining at the General Conference, because at least we were coming now as an entity to the General Conference, all Africa to the General Conference. And once we did that, our power was felt. So we are feeling that when we are beginning to have control and when we are beginning to call the shots at the General Conference, we are split up so that our voice is again diminished. That's the way I look at it in terms of regionalization as it is being proposed today. And then we go to the episcopacy. As I've said in my article, the part of the crisis that we have in the United Methodists today emanated, or at least it was given credence because of the election of Bishop Oliveto, who is a self-avowed practicing homosexual. And we protested because we understand the polity of the United Methodists dictates that a bishop in the United Methodists is a superintendent of the whole church, although resident in a specific episcopal area. So as we speak today, Bishop Oliveto is my bishop because she's a bishop of the whole church, although she is resident in the Western jurisdiction. If she were to come to Zimbabwe West Annual Conference today, I am bound to treat her as my bishop. If she finds a service of ordination there, she's bound to lay her hands on our clergy because she's a bishop of the United Methodists. So we are rejecting the idea of having practicing homosexuals being ordained and let alone elected as bishops. So under the current polity, you find out that, this is where the bone of contention is, and it is continued in the United Methodist that is being proposed there, where the Council of Bishops remains the same. It is not true that she belongs to the jurisdiction, although, yes, in terms of practice, she has her colleagues there, but she belongs to the General Conference. So if we want to really make sure that, what is done in one region does not affect other regions, then the episcopacy itself ought also to be regionalized so that those who elect lesbian and gay bishops do not indirectly impose those bishops on us. That is my thesis.
That makes sense. What would be required in order to regionalize the bishops as well? Would that be additional constitutional amendments that have not been submitted in the Christmas Covenant?
I mean, you see, I take what is happening is an attempt to reform the United Methodist Church. Mm-hmm. And the reformation does not start from the bottom. We reform the whole system. Because as we speak today, the centers of power in the United Methodists are not central conferences. The centers of power is the Council of Bishops, the Judicial Council, and the agencies. Those are the centers of power. Unless those are reformed, there is no reform that we are talking about, because power continued to be in those institutions. So what we are doing, that's why I use the term smoke screen. Because for me, the reformation is not going deep enough. My friend Lonnie knows that, in 2012, we were grappling with the same issue at the 2012 General Conference. But any attempt to reform the Council of Bishops is not even entertained. But if there is anything, we need to reform that. Then if they want a kind of regionalization, we cannot avoid then that we are pushing ourselves into a federation, not one organic unit. So that's where the catch is.
Yes, last week when we had Lloyd Nyoroto with us at the tail end of that, Joe DiPaolo was inquiring about whether or not any changes were to be made in the general boards and agencies where Africans are hardly represented at all. And then now we're talking about the episcopacy. So am I right to understand that that as you say that the Reformation doesn't go far enough, that until unless and until the episcopacy and the boards and agencies are made more equitable or perfectly divided, that really this regionalization plan is not sufficient at all.
Exactly.
Okay.
For example, in fact, I would take a cue from the United Nations system, which is similar to the United Methodist system. You see, United Nations is a number of agencies. Those agencies do not all reside where the headquarters of the UN is. You find that, others are in Geneva, others are in Africa, Kenya. So why would we have all 13 agencies of the United Methodists in the United States? For example, GBGM was created specifically to do work outside the United States. So logically, for example, it should have been, probably located in Africa. So it's not just a matter of representation, but it's also of making sure that the mechanisms, the institutions themselves, reflect that we belong to a worldwide church and not one church which has its agencies that go out there and do ministry. That is not what we are looking for.
Just briefly, whenever it'll be confusing to our viewers. Last week, Lloyd Nyirota also was very concerned about colonialism or neocolonialism. The way that he defined colonialism is one group of people exercising coercive authority on another group of people. That's basically what he said. Is that basically what you understand colonialism to be as well, or is there a difference in how he defines that word that results in you two being on opposite sides of this issue?
To start with, I think we are bringing, secular jargon into the church. I make a distinction between political colonialists and missionaries. I, for one, don't believe missionaries were colonial. For instance, this is why I still remain a Christian. It's because I believe the missionaries did a good job. They brought us education. They brought us hospitals. So I don't see colonialists and missionaries as synonyms. For example, I see in our context, particularly the British colonialists, at least they preserved our culture and our languages, as opposed to, say, the Portuguese. So I don't brush them all together. Today, I don't want to hide in secular jargon. We are speaking United Methodist here. And let us not try to cover up the real issues by bringing in all kinds of terms that we want to bring in to hide issues. The present moment is Zimbabwe has been independent 1980. I'm an independent person. So as I'm coming to the table, I want to see United Methodist as a church just do that which is right. And we are guided by scripture. We are guided by the Bible. We are guided by Christ, not by political history. So the basis of Reformation is not our political history, but what the scripture and what Christ says. That should be the basis of anything we do.
Makes perfect sense to me. Just for our viewers, if anybody is wanting to double check the language in the Book of Discipline and the logic that's being presented here, I was able to do just a quick search on the Book of Discipline, and paragraphs 403 and 404 use the term whole church in association with bishops more than once. And so what's being highlighted here is a significant issue that has been explicitly said by a couple of people in this crew now. The Christmas covenant does not ameliorate at all. So I've done what parts I can to try and make this more digestible for average viewers. Let's defer to Simon first. We'll just go through the list of you, and you let Forbes know what questions you have. So Simon, do you have any additional stuff you'd like to hear Forbes speak about?
Thank you, Jeff. Maybe Forbes could just touch a little bit on, so many people pop up and say they are the voices of Africa. And those voices seem to differ. How many voices represent his constituents in terms of what he sees going to General Conference, coming out of his article. I know what he says resonates with who I am, what I say, but I want to hear it from him. Because there are those who are saying, no, we are the super majority of delegates who are in Dar es Salaam. This is who we are. We are supporting regionalization. We are supporting the Christmas covenant. We endorse the new social principles, blah, blah, blah. How many voices are behind you, my brother, Reverend Matonga?
Well, thank you, Simon. I associate myself with Africa Initiative, and I don't see it as a puppet of anybody. But I think it represents a significant number of African delegates, of which I am a delegate. Jerry Kula is a delegate. And we are coming together as delegates to the General Conference. So these are specific people who really do the actual voting at the General Conference. So yes, I don't claim that all the African delegates stand with our view. No. But at least a significant number, probably around 60% to 70% of the delegates in Africa that I associate with as a delegate will be represented well with the division, the position that I am proposing here.
Let's look to Lonnie. Lonnie, anything to run by Forbes or have him respond to while he's with us?
I don't really have anything to add to what Forbes had to say. He and I have compared notes on a lot of this stuff in the past, and he was speaking for me on a lot of what he said there.
Excellent. Let's go to Odell.
Thank you, Forbes. I am speechless right now. So let me. Wow. Yeah, thank you for representing the independent African voice, and not the. I think a lot of times we are asking critical questions of conservatives and not asking critical questions of liberals in our American educational system that has also invaded the church. And so when you get independent Black people, they are gold. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For people who are listening to or watching this after we publish it, we this, as I said at the beginning, corresponds with an article that Forbes wrote where he deals with a lot more than the episcopacy. Really, that was kind of a byline. But he deals with the nature of coalitions and advocacy groups within the United Methodist Church and how foreign and strange that was to Africa, and then what's to be made of the United Methodist Africa Forum that got together in Tanzania a few weeks ago. And so that's connected to Simon's line of questioning. How do we interpret this big headline that a huge majority of delegates went there and they're all of the same mind? Well, one of the things that Forbes says in his article is, I'm a delegate. I know all the delegates in Zimbabwe. None of us got invites. So it's very unlikely that this speaks for a big group here. Odell, your hand's up.
I just want everybody to know watching that I have written an article called The Scramble for Africa. It should be published this week forthcoming, and it'll shed some more light onto this situation.
That's exciting.
With United Methodist News Service, Odell?
They would not publish it.
Oh.
Who's going to publish it?
I'll let you know when it's published.
Okay. All right. Joe, you're the last person to question Forbes, and then we're going to let him go.
Hey, Forbes, sure. Thank you for that. I guess it might be helpful for me and for the viewers to hear a little bit more about the delegates' status in Africa, because we're hearing reports that people are not going to get here because they didn't get their letters in time, that bishops are sometimes arbitrarily picking new delegates to replace others. Can you give us any sense of what's going on from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the most difficult things we are experiencing. One would have thought that because of these delays, that prepared the machinery of the General Conference to prepare best to host the delegates, especially from outside the United States. But unfortunately, until this time, we are still receiving invitation letters. And that is going to be very, very difficult, especially for those people that had never visited the United States before. I'll give you a concrete example. In Zimbabwe, it's a very small delegation. Already in our laity, the second elected delegate did not get a visa. And after that, the alternate would not have sufficient time to apply and go for interviews. But fortunately enough, the fourth one, we only sent too late. He had visited United States before. That's the only one who then managed to get the visa. So we are told as we speak that the bulk of the the Nigerian delegations have not yet gone even for interviews. And that interview is going to be done in Liberia. So things that we should have avoided, this conference should have taken place in 2020. And how that becomes an issue in 2024 with a whole machinery that is supposed to manage this process, it's really something that boggles the mind. So we think that because of that, probably a quarter, if not more than that, of African delegates might not make it to the general conference. Yeah, because if you look at the numbers, this is just amazing. The bulk of the DRC delegates have to travel to go to Zambia to get their visas. I don't have the figures right now of who now have and who don't have. But those are some of the things that we think surely should have been dealt with on time. And why just an invitation to just say you are being invited to come to the United States for a general conference would take that long so that it is left to the last minute to be done. We wrote several times and we have evidence to this, at times without even a response from the administrators of the general conference, as it were. So I think this is one of the problems that we have, Joe, practical challenges that we are going to be faced as African delegations. And then together with that, you've seen that, our brother Jerry Kula wrote to the administrators of the general conference. I mean, how do you want to dictate what I eat at the general conference? And at the same time, we are in a church that is talking about, being anti-colonial and all that. How do you want to dictate what I eat and where I should eat? I am an adult.
Yeah.
And at the same time, how do you need to tell me when to come and when to go out of the United States? Obviously, when we come to the United States, we do have friends, we do have families that are here. I have freedom to take advantage of that and visit with them. So how come the whole general conference sit down to say you need to come at this particular date and you must leave at this particular date? I mean, while we are talking of anti-colonialism and all that kind of rhetoric, it doesn't make sense to some of us. So those are some of the kind of frustrations that we do have, Joe, as we go to the general conference.
If that bears out to be true, 25% missing, that's going to have a big impact on the credibility of anything that comes out of this conference.
Yeah,
exactly.
Turn it.
Yeah.
And through you, Jeffrey, just to add a little bit, some more dynamics happening in Africa. We also have bona fide delegates being removed from their lists because they are known to be aligned to those who are calling for division in the church or disaffiliation. And I don't know when we started to disqualify people because they've got an opinion towards disaffiliation or separation. Only those who support regionalization and what they are calling the unit of the church are seen to be the ones who are supposed to attend the general conference. And I've seen some articles coming out of the United States saying only those who are wanting to remain in the United Methodist Church must attend this general conference. I don't know where people are getting that. That's why we have disaffiliations petitions, which are there properly placed for debate and voting. So our opinions do not define who should come to General Conference or not. So we have that kind of problem. And like Forbes said, I'll tell you the facts about Nigeria right now. They are busy applying for the appointments. And some of them are getting appointments as late as 15 April. And it takes a whole 7 days to get your visa, your passport back after they've stamped the visa in there. So if you go there on the 15th of April, you add 7 days, then you have to fly back to your country. You have to send the visa to the business authorities of the General Conference to organize a ticket for you. By the time eventually you get to General Conference, we have done half of the business is gone. So it's a sad situation. Thank you, Jeff.
It needs to be substantiated that bishops in Africa are removing people from delegations based on their stance on regionalization. So we should follow up after this conversation to figure out specific names of bishops and delegates being removed, because that's quite an allegation, and that needs to be, if that can be substantiated, then that also calls into question the validity of this any decisions made at this upcoming General Conference. Another piece of information that directly ties to this, I was sent this morning a letter sent on behalf of the African delegation by Jerry Kula 4 days ago on March 4th, directly to Sarah Hotchkiss, who is the business manager of the General Conference, making a number of these allegations that you guys have made on top of a number of people that have gone to get their visa appointment are not even allowed to make their case to why they need the visa and are dismissed out of hand. And that's happened many times as well. So I'll be doing a separate piece, publishing a separate piece on this. This is a 3-page document that I was, no, just a 2-page doc, no, 3. Anyway, for people who are interested to know more about this is worth paying attention to. And then I would redirect the audience to stay tuned about Odell's upcoming article. He does very fine work whenever he sets things down in writing. So. Forbes, we only had you for a little bit, and you've been very gracious with your time. Are there any closing meditations, thoughts, reflections you'd like to offer us before you say goodbye?
Jeffrey, before you do that, I have a question for Forbes.
Okay.
What is the reality of the 2028 General Conference being in Harare, Zimbabwe at this particular point?
I don't think that is going to go on. If my memory serves me right, maybe Simon will help me. But I think it was moved. It's not going to be in Harare anymore. Maybe Simon can do that. But I got rumor that it's no longer coming to Harare, as it were.
I don't have the official position. I also got from the grapevine that it may not come. Now that they canceled Philippines, well, that was supposed to be the first General Conference outside of America, in history. But it was then canceled. That's why we are going back 2024 to the States. And 2028, it's very doubtful. But again, I don't have really an official position.
All right, Forbes, whatever you want to say, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so very much. What I'm going to say is that when those in authority push for reformation, then it is not reformation, it is consolidation of power. Reformation starts from grassroots. And the processes of the United Methodists, unfortunately, are not listening to what the people in the pews are saying. So reformation starts from the grassroots. It never starts from the top. If it does so, that's power consolidation. Thank you very much.
Very worthy thought. Thank you so much, Forbes. God bless you in whatever work you're doing over there in Georgia, and I'll look forward to the next opportunity to visit with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, guys, we need to digest what he said in light of the general topic today of episcopacy. Lonnie, his closing thought engages kind of a theme that we've had where I and maybe a couple of the others have been inclined to look at who the author or initiator of certain legislation is as relevant to how we should interpret it and its intentions. And you've been of the mind that really the author or originator doesn't matter. What matters is the substance. I just live in a world where language gets wrangled all the time, especially among English speakers, to mean things other than what it seemed originally to intend. So that's why I care about who the author is. Forbes, in his closing response, says the origin point matters. If the origin point is the top, then you can take for granted that it's a consolidation of power. If it came from the bottom, then no, we should be more optimistic about that. Does that feel like the same ballpark of the general conversation we've had in trying to figure out the pros and cons, or does that feel like a different thing off to the side?
I think it's a little bit of both, Jeffrey. I think that his insight is extremely important. That the origin does matter in that it gives you a point of view from which to examine the substance of the idea. It doesn't say that, in my judgment, that should be the determinant, but certainly gives an orientation from which to look at it. The idea that a reformation that starts from the top isn't reformation in a real sense, but in fact is a consolidation of power. I think that's an important point that we have to take into account when evaluating what's within whatever the proposal is. On examination, it may show that in fact what is being proposed is a real reformation, in which case it would give a different view of the outcome. But in any case, we'd call it in theological terms a hermeneutic of suspicion of an idea that comes from the top. And I believe that's valid.
I think that's helpful. Thank you, Lonnie.